putting kids' lives in danger, but those types of people don't see that.
Assess, train, and protect.
Go to school this day and you protect the school. And guess what? They never have active shooters in their schools.
Exactly. So we have a duty as parents, as adults, as Americans to protect our children, and that's what comes first for us all the time.
Welcome to the podcast. Obviously, the reason why I definitely wanted to have you on once I learned about you, and it was a connection of mine that introduced us, and it's somebody that I very much trust, so I immediately reached out to you and have been, nothing but impressed with your organization, with talking with every person that is in your organization. So far, it's been great. So I want to give you a platform to be able to share, as I've already tried to share some solutions that people are coming up with that can save people's lives, especially in school shooting scenarios, which I think is the reason why you got into this sector, correct? And then, of course, it applies to many different areas, but again, saving children's lives is what your passion and mine, and just about your company, about your product, how it all came to be, and kind of give everybody an idea as to why they should look into your product for their schools.
Sure. So I would say we're a lot different than most companies that are out there. We're a mission-driven company. Over 11 and a half years ago, nearly 12 years ago, I started Armored One the night of the Sandy Hook attack. So that was December 14th, 2012. And everyone remembers that day. Earlier that day, Sandy Hook came under attack. An attacker came to the front doors. The doors were locked. He pushed a button on an airphone and asked to come in. They wouldn't let him in. He walked over to the side window right next to the door, shot the glass, came in, and in around 3 minutes, he killed 20 first graders and 6 adults, and then killed himself. And actually, one of my friends was number 2 on scene, right behind the police chief. As they arrived, a retired state trooper, friend of mine, and that night was a big realization for me. At the time, I was a SWAT operator and a homicide detective in upstate New York, Syracuse area. We do dual purpose jobs, so full-time as a homicide detective, but then also part-time as a SWAT operator. So if something SWAT related happens, it overrides what you're doing in homicide, and you go do that, depending on if you're the primary, detective on it. But with that, I had the feeling that I could protect my own wife, who was a city school teacher, and my kids. We have 6 kids, and 4 of them were in school at the time, so age appropriate in school, and the other ones were waiting to go in school. Now it's to the point of 5 of my kids are graduated and 1's left in school. So to give you an idea where my kids stand. But I realized I couldn't protect my own wife. And our headquarters, where we were headquartered in the city of Syracuse, even going lights and sirens was a 5-minute ride to my wife to protect my own wife. And I was at least 20 minutes to my own kids to protect them. And here I am as a SWAT operator, subject matter expert in active shooter, teaching people active shooter response. And I say people, police officers response at this time. We were teaching them all over how to respond to active shooter, all different agencies, how to respond to active shooter, take out the threat, how you should move. And I was really feeling confident that I could protect my own wife, my own kids, and I realized quickly that I couldn't that day. And in a 3-minute attack, and we lost 26 people. So that night when I was watching TV, she's now a good friend of mine, Caitlin Roy DeBellis, was a first grade teacher who put 15 kids in her bathroom in her classroom. So her classroom door was either left open or she knew it was unlocked. The keys were on her desk. It was story time in the morning where she was reading on the carpet area. She heard gunshots literally on the other side of the wall. So gunshots are going off here with an AR-15. She knows it's death. They haven't been trained properly. They were not trained correctly. They were not ready to be trained or ready for the attack because of lack of training, but she knew in her gut what she had to do. She put the kids in the bathroom. And you being an expert too in security and all the stuff that you've done, Seth, she was smart and she didn't realize it. She went into an in-swing bathroom door, put the kids in there, stacking them on the toilet, standing on top of the toilet, you name it. She stuffed them in a 3x5 tiny little bathroom and pulled a bookcase. This is what I really believe saved her life, is pulled the bookcase in front of her door. So as the shooter looked into the room, he did not see a closet door or a bathroom door to find her and the victims. And she closed the door and kept the kids inside there. And she was so close too. I actually did a podcast with her a year or 2 ago, last year actually, the 10-year anniversary, and interviewed her, and she could hear kids getting killed on the other side, begging for their lives, every gunshot. You talk about horror, like things that we don't even see most of our military people don't see, nonetheless, our police, but now these little kids are seeing and teachers and staff are seeing. And that night was a game changer for me. And when I started Armored One, and I started Armored One with the idea of assess, train, and protect. So assess is we do assessments, and we have a team of experts, actually 33 experts that have put into this security assessment that we do. And Travis Forrester, my director of assessments, is former law enforcement police, and then he did Secret Service, and he also did 6 or 7 years at the largest school district in the state of South Carolina, public school district, with over 100 buildings in their portfolio. Just a phenomenal guy leading this team, and we come in and we do assessments and we do training. The training has been now taken over by my wife, who was the English high school teacher. My wife, after about 4 years, started to come and work for Armored One and did Armored One training. She came on as a director, and we brought her on because we had incredible content. We had Navy SEALs and Delta Force, and even one of my buddies, the first ever Homeland Security agent, sworn in on the back of a cereal box. These are the type of people that are giving us advice, what needs to be done, why it needs to be done. And she's leading teams like this of men and women that are teaching, but we are teaching too militaristic. We were teaching too much like cops, and she started to change it. It was started to become led by a teacher, taught like a teacher, but with the correct content that saves lives. And that quickly exploded, and she actually separated. We started a new company, a woman business owned, minority owned. She's Mexican too, so she has that and runs the training. It's online and in person, where we train hundreds of thousands of people. And then the last portion is the protect. The protection was what we knew we needed to do that night. And I'm glad to say too, we haven't gotten into anything else in 12 years, but we've invented, created, and manufacture our own window film and glass that meets an active shooter standard called the ASTM F3561. That's an independent testing company for all those of you who don't know. ASTM is testing standards, international testing standards. And the F3561 is a simulated active shooter attack on fenestration or glass or openings, where it's shot with an AR-15, hit with a 100-pound ram, and levels of forces to see where it stands. And we sell levels 1 of film all the way through level 8 of glass that we manufacture, we make in Syracuse, New York, and distribute all over the country and a little bit even into other countries. But our primary focus, as you said in the beginning, is K through 12 schools. That's where our heart has been. That's where my job as CEO has been, to rally all of our staff, hundreds of staff across the United States, on focusing on K through 12 schools. We have a duty as parents, as adults, as Americans, to protect our children, and that's what comes first for us all the time, whether it be a federal building, one of the biggest companies in the world that we've done work for. It doesn't matter. They don't take priority over our K through 12 schools. It's always the K through 12, giving them the best that we can give, and with the ideas, and you doing security assessments, building security all over the world to a level that I've never even been at. Our goal is to slow down the attacker and speed up the police response. How do we do that? How do we slow down the attacker, give people a fighting chance, give the police a fighting chance? Because when they showed up at Sandy Hook, literally the 2 guys showing up, first ones on scene, heard one last shot, and that was the killer shooting himself. So the thing was, they didn't even stand a chance to go to combat with him, to stop him, to slow him down. He had already killed 26 and then kills himself too, and they didn't stand a chance. If we could have just bought them a few minutes where he didn't get into the building, where he didn't get into a classroom, where he didn't get into the next classroom, we could have kept him out. I know we could have saved lives. And the thing is we've had one of our schools attacked where our products have been in place, training's been in place, the assessments, lockdown buttons, all the stuff that we teach them and show them, flashing blue lights, bought them enough time that in 8 minutes we were able to keep the bad guy at bay, and not one person was injured, not one person was killed, because the school was prepared and ready. And it wasn't just us, it was what we told them they needed, and everything working together as one to make that happen.
The whole reason for the name of my for my podcast and organization now is our schools need to be like our embassies, and it doesn't mean that you need to spend $1 billion. The latest embassy they spent $1 billion on it. Obviously, that's ridiculous and overkill for a building, but at the same time, what you see when you go into them is that it's rings of security. What you just described is what I'm trying to scream from the rooftops here is we need layers that will slow down, will detect, deter, and then slow down. Obviously, the goal is always to save lives by any means possible. And I think that your product, in concert, like you just said, with other things, all go together into this, multi layers that makes a possible or potential shooter not choose that school, not choose a school. And we've seen recently where, what was it? I think it was Walmart. Forget what state was hit, and it wasn't. He didn't get very far because somebody was armed and ended up confronting him, and then he stopped shooting. Imagine that. But I think that's something nobody talks about, is if these people are depressed and they're suicidal, right now they know that if they go to a school, people don't have guns there, so they know that that's the area that they can inflict the most damage, get the most shock value out of America, make sure their name is remembered, because there's going to be, right now we're doing movies on Netflix with serial killers. Zac Efron just acted in a movie a couple of years ago as a serial killer. What do you think that teaches everybody out there right now who is sadistic and psychopathic, and they're thinking about doing horrible things? They know if they get a high enough body count or they're interesting, that years and years after they're dead, movies may be made of them. And that's the problem with talking about the names of these shooters, of all the other aspects of this, right? And so there's not just one layer. We can't just throw more guns at it. We can't just throw more armor at it. This is a issue that's going to be having to be attacked on multiple different fronts across the entire country, and not just by you and me, by everyday citizens. I was just talking with a dad right before at this property, and he's like, I'm terrified for my kids every day when they go to school. I always think about that, but I sit there and just put my hands in the air going, they have to legally go to school. I can't keep them out. I don't want to keep them from an education. But what do I do? And I was like, exactly, that's the problem, is people aren't taking it serious that are in positions of power, and they're not allocating enough money or time into looking into these options, because they're not all going to break the bank. It's just people aren't really seeking out people like you and people like Peter that I interviewed for my first episode, guys like you that are coming up with physical products that can save lives are a no-brainer that every school should immediately be like some parent should be telling the school board about your film, and they should be talking about Peter's bookshelf that stops bullets. And oh, by the way, the back of it is a mirror, so they'll be shooting at themselves while they're pulling the trigger. Like, it's a no-brainer that these layers is a big part of that solution in my eyes.
Yeah, Seth, you nailed it. With what you did with embassies, you're building a safe fortress to protect the important people, right? And what's most important to us is our children and our country's children. There is no future without America's kids. And what you and I think is a no-brainer for schools, sadly, I'll tell you, with working with over 20,000 school districts in the United States, it's not for them. I was just given word this week. We worked since last September on a project for a large, very, very large school district in the state of Florida. Very large school district that I won't name. Very close with them on what needs to be done, why it needs to be done, from architectural drawings to multiple live demos, sending products, having them test side by side. They test products. And at the beginning, too, you said, Tom, tell people why they should work with Armored One and buy your products. And I'm not even going to pitch people to come and buy our products. I'm asking you to meet a minimal standard that's going to protect the kids. That ASTM that I mentioned, the F3561, is created and backed by the National Glass Association, a not-for-profit independent that works with all the different glass companies, so there's not one benefit to me or anyone else. It levels the playing field, and it gives that minimal standard, which I know you dealt with NIJ and UL and ASTM, you name it, for products and solutions when you were working on embassies. When it comes to the schools, what can they afford? What do they have money for? Because a lot of people think bulletproof glass exists, right? It doesn't exist at all. There's bullet resistant, and even when you get to bullet resistant, we can afford it in an embassy because they're spending $1 billion, but they're only spending $40 million on your new school, your elementary school, or whatever they're building, not $1 billion. So they're not going to put in bullet resistant doors, bullet resistant glass, bullet resistant walls, smart glass that's going to change and turn black or opaque or white. All of these things that exist in the movies is not going to happen. But I tell you about the school in Florida because since September, so now for nearly 1 year, we've been working closely with the school district and with their sheriff's department. The sheriff's department called us and said, you guys submitted your bids. They went out to bid. They were delayed almost 2 months since the bid opening. And when you open a bid publicly, you're supposed to tell everyone what the bids were at and then who you're going with and why. We were the only company that met the specifications that they put out. We were the only company that passed their demos. We were the only company that sent them all the products that they needed and outperformed everyone else. And they tell us just yesterday, we're not using anyone. We're going back to the drawing board. And when we got a call from someone at the sheriff's department, they said they're checking the box and they're going with the least expensive. There's garbage crap out there that does not pass an ASTM standard. And the thing is it's going to cost your school nearly nothing because it does nothing. And the way that I put this to parents or grandparents or aunts and uncles, because you said they should be going to their boards and their superintendents and telling them, tell them to meet the standard. Don't even mention my name, because if they're doing it right, I don't care. We've got enough work and enough business. But what I want is them to do it right. You compare it to your kid or their kid needing open heart surgery or their heart replaced, right? So they need their heart replaced, their heart shot, and they're going to die if they don't get a new heart. So we're going to have to do a heart transplant on your child, Seth. And then I come to you as a doctor and I say, you know what? It's been a month. We can't get it. It's super expensive for the heart, but I've got somebody who can give your kid a kidney. So it's half the price. Here's a kidney for your kid. Your kid is still going to die, right? It's not going to do anything. It's not apples to oranges. It's literally life-saving. When you put it into those contexts, you're handing somebody a kidney for their kid who needs a heart when their kid needs a heart, and you have a heart, but you're not willing to pay for it or get it because it's too much work or it's too, to me, there is no excuse. And he literally, when we got the call from the deputy, he said, they're checking the box. I'm disgusted, stepping off the board because I'm not going to be a part of this, but they're checking the box so that the public thinks something's done, but this product gives zero security at all. It's made for weathering. It's made for high winds, and that's it. Not even tornadoes, not hurricanes, just high winds so that your glass doesn't fall on you. And that's the solution. But we see this all over the country. And one of my sales guys, he's a retired cop of about 30 years. He was heartbroken. He's like, not because he needs the sale. We're not a commission based. He doesn't get commissions. He wants the sale because he wants to protect. And he's like, I cannot figure out why they're not doing this. And he's like, I'm not going to quit until, and I tried telling him, his name is Tom as well. I said, Tom, give it a rest. They're not these, there's so much corruption across the United States. Somebody's either getting a kickback, or number two is exactly what the deputy said, is it's checking the box. We're checking the box with the other product. If our product is $50 a square foot, theirs is $15 a square foot. It's $15 a square foot because it does nothing for it. It's like me handing you a piece of paper and telling you this is going to secure your school. It doesn't matter, but we see this all the time, Seth. And the thing is when you were building embassies, you had to meet those standards. There was a code that was met, and they said, here is your standard. You cannot buy this door unless it meets this code. You cannot buy these cameras unless it meets this code. And then you could choose whoever you wanted. But the schools are not done that way. If it appears to be good, if it's shiny after a shooting, we call it security theater. When there's a major shooting, all of a sudden everyone wants to do something. The state of Texas, you talk about trash, wasted money. Some of these schools did it right. 90% of them did not. They put out about $400 million and 90% of it went to waste because they bought the wrong products, the wrong things, because it was post-Uvalde shooting. Here's the knee-jerk reaction from the governor and from the state. Do this. You're going to secure windows. You're going to do X, Y, Z. But they did not give a true standard. So they could buy whatever they wanted. They could buy tinted windows and claim to slow down an attacker. And they said, okay. And they checked the box and they walked away. Those kids are no safer today than they were on May 23rd of 2022 when Uvalde happened, day before Uvalde. So with that, this is where we stand in America and what keeps on happening. And I'm shouting it from the rooftops. I even have a book coming out here in about a week that talks about this. But nothing's being done. It's not being done by Democrats or Republicans. It's not being done by presidents, former presidents. No one is changing anything, and we've seen it going on since Columbine.
So tell us the name of your book again to make sure.
So the book that's coming out is Staying One Step Ahead. So if you go on just Amazon and you type Tom Czyz, TOMCZYZ, it'll come up, or you can go to tomczyz.com. And the book too, you can pre-order. The good thing is for any law enforcement school teacher, from what I've been told, it's a tax write-off. It's educational for us to continue. So the $19.99 can be written off on your taxes. We are also and have been donating to schools like Uvalde. So the money's there too will go to help those things and really go out to hopefully educate. We cover like the top 10 commandments. We call them the safety commandments that schools should be following that aren't followed in 90% of America's schools.
Absolutely. So I'm going to be buying that, and I'm going to be covering that book. I'm going to do a deep dive into it and kind of, again, I'm going to be sharing my 2 cents from my experience. But again, the main thing is using the little platform I have at the moment, but this thing is going to live on forever. And the problem is obviously is we're going to have to keep doing this for who knows how many years until people really start taking it serious. And again, there's no way that you can expect you or I to just overnight become Joe Rogan. And even Joe Rogan can't tell something on his podcast and every school across America is going to change what they're doing. It's just not going to happen. It's not realistic, right? It only is at that level. It's only change coming from the government, and it's only requirements. And a great way to actually to analogize this, my job right now, I just started a new job. So it came from insurance companies who essentially came to, and this will make sense for and just bear with me a second. Insurance companies came to the state and said, hey, we're paying too much out. What can we do essentially as extra credit so that we're not as liable in when somebody slips and falls? So the state goes, okay, well, these are the minimum requirements. You got to trim your bushes. You got to have good lighting. You got to fill in the blank, right? The paragraph is literally like this long. I have to go through a 3-day course where we're going to read a paragraph this long, and it's the most vague paragraph you'll ever read. And this isn't a something against the state. They're trying to get something going that is a standard, right? Like what you're talking about. There needs to be a minimum standard that should be applied. And unfortunately, I think it may end up coming from something like that. It may come from not necessarily insurance, because schools obviously are different, but it's going to come from something you didn't expect. And that's a workaround, because otherwise, how do you, after Uvalde, after Sandy Hook, after Stoneman Douglas, after all of these shootings, what at this point is going to get through to everybody to make changes? And realistically, they're going to have to be forced. And that's just a reality. They're going to have to be forced to do it. Where's the money going to come from? Well, figure it out. I hate to say it like that, because I understand there's budgets, but what you just said is what I've experienced my entire adult life, especially once I got into law enforcement, federal law enforcement. Once I saw behind the curtain and I saw how much everything runs off of either checking boxes or kickbacks, and primarily kickbacks. I've seen more kickback, and that's even in law enforcement. Somebody's wanting police officers to do this or that, and then all of a sudden a donation goes out to a sheriff. And I'm not talking about in Florida where we live. I'm talking about in Oklahoma where I'm from. And a magical donation goes to the sheriff, and then all of a sudden, guess where all the sheriff's deputies are? They're over at this property guarding somebody's birthday party, guarding something, right? And that happens on the daily across America. And unfortunately, it's putting kids' lives in danger. But those types of people don't see that, right? They think, well, it's just money that that I need, but they don't think a shooting is actually going to happen until it does, and then it's too late.
Well, that's one thing I didn't share too, is that I've been to over 61 school shootings to be specific, since I started my company. So after Sandy Hook happened, I got in the car and I drove to Sandy Hook Elementary and started interviewing people to find out what happened. I didn't want to wait a year for the federal government to tell us what went on. And also, it's depending on who's president. And this is where I get, strike some nerves with people. But if you're a Republican or Democrat, at the time when Sandy Hook happened, we had Obama as president. He is definitely anti-gun, anti-AR-15. And the way the FBI report read was everything was a gun problem. No security flaws, no nothing. With your Ranger background, your police background, your embassy building background, you could look at Sandy Hook Elementary and be like, holy flaws, this is terrible, right? And the thing is when President Trump, he's pro-gun, NRA, good people can have guns. And when Parkland happened, it was arm every teacher, right? So the thing is since 1999 in Columbine, things haven't changed. But if we took the look at what you said of creating a standard, and we go back to December 1st of 1958, Our Lady of Angel Schools in Chicago, Illinois had a fire. That fire killed 92 students and 3 nuns that day. 92 students and 3 nuns that day. And the head of the NFPA, the National Fire Safety Prevention Association, the NFPA said something to the fact of there were no new lessons learned today from this, just old ones that we've seen happen again. Think if that man back in 1958 was saying that after Uvalde, after the Nashville attack, after the Parkland attack, after the Sandy Hook, he could say the same exact thing of it not being a fire. There was nothing new learned. The same things in Columbine that were happening are happening today. When I do a comparison, I do a Nashville debrief right now that I've been doing nationwide, teaching at different school events, whether it be for superintendents. I also do law enforcement, but law enforcement, school resource officers, heads of facilities. I teach it all over the place, and I talk about Nashville. Nashville was in March of 2023. 5 years earlier, in February of 2018, we had the Parkland attack. The kids on the second floor of Nashville died because the fire alarm was going off. The gun made the fire alarm go off. The smoke and fire and all that makes the alarm go off, just like in Parkland. Both alarms are going off. Parkland in 2018, Nashville at Covenant Presbyterian School. In 2023, the alarms are screaming, rant, rant, rant. You can see when those officers, badasses, come in, right? I know you saw that, Seth, where Rex and the other officer come in and they go and kick ass. They take the shooter out. They're pretty much running upstairs. And you, with your special forces background too, me as a SWAT guy, I'm looking at them as they're highly trained. Some of these guys have got to be tactical SWAT, something. They were patrol guys that trained for that. The police chief, Drake, told me we trained 12 years for these 14 minutes. And they went in like Olympians and they nailed it. They took out the shooter, but you can see on their body cams, you can hear the fire alarm screaming, rant, rant, rant. That happened in Parkland in 2018. All the students and staff that died on the 3rd floor that were shot, injured, or killed on the 3rd floor were because of that fire alarm screaming and confusion, and them not knowing if we're having a drill, if it's a fire alarm. 300 kids were in the hallway in Parkland in 2018 getting ready to leave. Someone sees a gunman on the staircase and they're scattering to their classrooms. One teacher even locked himself out of the room, didn't bring his key. And here what we have is kids are killed, staff are killed on the 3rd floor. And then 5 years later, we had 5 years to learn our lesson to fix this. 5 years later, that alarm is going off, and the teacher on the 2nd floor, no fault to her, begins to empty the classroom because she cannot hear the gunshots, and here's a fire alarm, and the shooter's able to kill 3 of those students that are exiting. Why have we not learned our lessons? Why have we not fixed them? Why are we letting the same thing happen over and over again? And it's because, like you said, there's either bribery going on, there's, hey, this is my cousin's business. Hey, the amount of times we're told, because we're based out of New York, we're a nationwide company. I'm with you right now in South Carolina. We have offices in Florida and Texas, you name it. We're all over the place. And we're told you are not a local company. We are not using you. Well, if it came to an EpiPen and your kid got stung by a bee and they're going to die at a school, are you not using EpiPen because it wasn't made in Tampa, Florida? Or because it wasn't made in Sarasota or wherever? Like the nonsense that goes through their brains and what they're allowed to make decisions with hundreds of millions or billions of dollars is unacceptable. It really needs to be fixed at a majority of our schools across the nation.
Right. And what you just said, as far as the favoritism of local businesses, right? Again, if I just said out of the blue, we're no discussion whatsoever ahead of time, I just walk up to you and go, hey, would you rather support a local business or somebody from out of state? Most people are like, I mean, I guess local. okay, but the guy from out of state actually knows what he's talking about, and he's been doing this for years, and here's his track record, and here's the podcast he's been on, and here's the interviews he's done with the actual people at the shootings. Does that change your mind? Well, of course. Well, exactly. And that's the problem is they're literally doing blanket check boxes.
Yeah.
And again, so that's a dual. That's the double. That's the check box. And also, if it's local, chances are donations might be made. There's going to be some kickback, or at least I know somebody who I can help out with this.
Yes. Because
again, they don't care about the EpiPen essentially, right? Yeah. They don't care about the actual answer, or they don't care about the problem, finding a real solution. They want to say that they did something, and they want to be in the parade every year, and they want people to give them a pat on the back. But then what happens after the shooting? Oh, it was the gun's fault now.
Yeah.
Right. And so those are the same people that are then shouting from the CNN and MSNBC and all the other news cameras that are there. They're the ones talking about how guns did this, and we did all these things to secure our schools. That's again because they don't care about really getting the real solution. They care about checking boxes.
Yeah.
And it costs kids' lives, and that's the part that's sickening to me as a father now, as a new dad, and then as a law enforcement officer and somebody who's seen people lose their life because of other people's either mistakes or laziness and greed.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and that's the thing that really gets me too. It kind of reminds me there's an old commercial probably from when we were younger, and our younger listeners won't remember, but the salsa commercial. Remember the cowboy? They're out and he says it's salsa's made in New York and they all have a fit. You can't have it because it's not from Texas. And then they have their Texas salsa. That is really how it is. I mean, one of the biggest school districts in the state of Texas put in over $20 million worth of window film that does absolutely nothing. Does nothing to protect them because it's a local. Probably someone's pockets got lined. If the cops are hearing this and you want to track it down, you probably know what district I'm talking about. But if you tracked it down, somebody's pockets got lined to do that. And we were even asked at this district, well, we'd consider yours if you let the locals do it. They're not certified to put they're not going to put it in right. Our product's not going to perform right. That's not how this works. It's not what we're trying to hinder. And if they knew anything about our company, I'll take Houston, Texas is a huge area that we're doing work in. We have a lot of employees in Houston, Texas. And if you're looking for a job in Houston, Texas, please go to armored1.com and hit careers because we will hire you. We build our own teams in every state and in every area that we get major contracts with. So whether it's Tallahassee, Florida, or it's Houston, Texas, if we're doing work for you, we're going to build teams out in those areas, which means putting money back into your economy and into your people right there. And we don't just use them for that job for 6 months or 2 years. They continue to be our employees, and they go whether it's all over that state or all over the country. We've got a team from Tampa right now of installers that are supporting the Houston teams right now and the Austin teams, I believe, or San Antonio teams. They're flying literally from Tampa, getting on planes every Monday and coming home Thursdays to support those teams because we can't hire enough in that state. But we actually build out for those areas. But we see it constantly where it's laziness, bribery. I'm running for the school board, and Armored One's not going to donate out of New York for me to be on the school board, but A to Z Tinning Company will. So we're going to use them, or A to Z Glass is going to, and we're going to put in a safety glass and not a security glass. This goes on every day, and the thing is we just document and have it because God forbid there's a shooting at that school. We're going to be testifying against that superintendent, against that board member, against that facilities director that knew what the truth was, but they wanted something less expensive or wanted to write it off and had an opportunity. One in South Carolina alone where the head of security said, this is the standard you need to meet. And it's between Armored One and 2 other companies. And they went with a local vendor for a safety glass for a security issue. And the head of security actually ended up leaving that school and saying, I'm having to actually quit his job and was done with them because it was that bad that you're letting a head of construction. And if you know anything, which I know you do, Seth, with your background with Embassy, they are constantly, general contractors are constantly trying to value engineer out products. And for layman's terms for you people listening, that means they're trying to get something for a lot less expensive so they can save the end user some money and they get a kickback for that. Well, you saved us 15%, here's 3% of that. And that's a big deal when it's $1 billion or $100 million project and you're saving 10% and they're giving you 3 of it. That's a big deal that they're getting a lot of money back for that.
And again, it sounds like we're just going after, everybody's being greedy, blah, blah, blah. But what anybody who's an adult who's worked in really any industry, every bonus is based on how much money you can save, even how much you can not be shoplifted from your store, whatever it is. It's not complicated to figure out why this is happening. And we're 35 minutes in. The main thing that I want to make sure that if you're a parent and you're hearing this podcast, get your book, go through your book, pre-order that, read through that. I'm going to be covering it. If you don't know much about security, by the end of this, at least you'll have the vernacular, the words that you need to be able to say the right things so that you can convey to those people in charge of your school board. All you need to affect is your school board. All you need to affect is your child, their safety. And if we get enough people, enough parents to just affect where they are with what they have, being armed with the right words because they understand. So whenever A to Z glass shows up and they are given this little, oh yeah, and it will stop, da 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 da. Yeah, can you demonstrate that? Where's this demonstration? Da da da. And then they can shoot that down, for lack of a better term, with facts, right? And then when they really, the school board understands that they have educated parents, that's what terrifies them, because they know they can't get around, they can't get kickbacks because they'll be outed, right? And that's what you have to do. If your school board is just checking boxes and they're not making your school safe, you got to get them out of their position, and you got to get somebody, whether a parent, make it you. And that's the other part. I think a big portion of this is mobilizing parents to take an active role in their child's school district, in their child's schools. And it's funny because when I was working overseas in Baghdad, one of the Israeli guys that I worked with, he was an interpreter, but he spoke like 7 languages. And he was saying, in Israel, they don't pay for security guards, but there's armed guys everywhere on the school property. Yeah. I was like, well, how does that work? Is it the military? He's like, no, everybody's dad or mom, because they're all required to be in the military, and they all know how to handle weapons, and they all have weapons. They all take turns. Today is your day. You go to school this day and you protect the school. And guess what? They never have active shooters in their schools. So it's that active role. You don't have to be armed to the teeth. You don't have to become a special operations operator or SWAT team member. Just having the words that you understand. So whenever somebody is trying to sell you snake oil, you can call them on it. That's where I think change is affected on the local level.
Yeah, I agree. I just so you know, too, with the book, people think too when you author a book, you're going to get rich from writing a book. Not this kind of book. This is not like a purpose-driven life where people are going to buy 50 million copies or Wish You Were Here or The Orphanage or anything like that you'd find on Amazon. But you will see after September 3rd, there's going to be a Kindle special where it's either 99 cents, it might even be free. When I talk to my publisher, which is Forbes Magazine, and Forbes Books, they're doing a big promotion because this is an educational that will help people learn, but we can pretty much get it for free on there too. 99 cents are free. And what I challenge people, because you threw it out there too, read up on it. It's written in very plain language with some history of my life. And then what I've thrown in is the shootings that I've been to and how they tie together and why we go to them and why I did the investigations the way I did and do. But with that, Seth, if they're listening and they hit me up, they can go to armored1.com, hit info. It'll get to my assistant, Catherine. But if they send an email and say, I heard Tom on Seth Ryan's show, I read the book, and now I want my superintendent to have it, I will send you a book for free so you can give it to your superintendent. I want it on their bookshelf. I want it on their desk, and I want it to be a reminder that they have to do something. If they do those basic 10 steps, like we said, The same thing since 99 has been happening since Columbine. And if we wanted to get into guns, which we're not even going to today, but like you were saying, we blame the gun, we blame all sorts of things. They've been blaming the same stuff for 25 years. And what I'm telling you is there's data and analytics that are showing us exactly what's happening, exactly how to slow them down, stop them, and win. And the thing is if we start beating these shooters, because as you said, that the shooter is suicidal, they want to go down in infamy, they want that Columbine, Adolf Hitler feel of when we're dead, we can look back and we can be happy at all the destruction we made. Stop saying their names, stop promoting them, stop putting them up after the Virginia Tech shooting for months and months, after the Uvalde shooting for months and months. They want to go down in infamy. Instead of them killing themselves in their backyards or their basement, they're now going to a school and killing little kids. They have nothing to do with their lives, just to put pain on everyone and go down in infamy. Take that away from them by doing the 10 commandments of security, by intervening. If you know somebody who's suicidal, you parents that are out there and say, my 10th grade son's best friend is suicidal, get them help. This is what can save their lives, because suicide and homicide are very closely knitted. When you see bad things happen, a lot of times you find out that they were suicidal first.
That is a fact. And I didn't realize that truly. And I have multiple members of my family committed suicide. And I didn't know that until I was a police officer and I started dealing with suicidal subjects. And I became a crisis intervention trained officer, and then I go respond to all the, schizophrenic off their medication, suicidal, and, violent, and they've already hurt somebody. Now I show up, and now I've got to talk them down, right? So I know how fast that can turn from suicide to homicide, back to suicide, and that's where you see a lot of these multiple homicide and then suicide. It's right, they're already to that point, and then they decide to take others with them. And but to get back to what you said, like, you have to, I'm finishing my book too. I'm not gonna make money on my book. What I want to do is inspire kids, and that this is what I was going to say was the other side of my podcast, which I've learned very quickly is very much needed, is the on switch, and that's where we give young kids that are depressed something to go toward. It's not just feel good. Hey, you can do it, kid. Keep going. That's rah. That's good to have on your mirror. That's cool, a bumper sticker. But when you hear of somebody who went through crazy hard things and then they came out on the other end and they're like, I'm not different. I'm literally you. I just started doing something different with my life, and here I am years later telling you what it looks like. You can see the progress. That's it. And these kids, specifically Oxford shooting in Michigan, that podcast is going to be out on Friday of this week, and I interviewed Melissa, and she ran the Facebook page for the whole community. It's a very tight-knit community.
Yep. And
the reason I bring this up is because every kid in that school knew that kid was going to come to school with a gun.
Oh, yeah.
Every kid knew it.
Yep.
Every kid knew that. There were kids there that had guns themselves in their bags. They didn't have the opportunity. They ended up running. They didn't have the opportunity to face him or that. But again, all the kids knew that this kid was going to do it. And yet nobody was doing anything. Meanwhile, the day he does the shooting, he has the gun loaded in his bag, and the parents are right there.
Yep.
They were called into the office because he was drawing, and I actually will show the drawings because I got access to those as well, and those have been redacted. The big media doesn't want you to see those,
yep.
And it's disturbing when you see that there's a kid drawing pictures of him executing other kids in class and saying horrific things that every kid in there knows is going to happen. And then what are these kids supposed to do? Just stay home from school forever?
Right.
Because that kid's eventually going to do it, right? We have to take back our community. We have to take back our schools. And it's talking to our own kids and being like, hey, if there's a kid that creeps you out, like, let's keep an eye on him. Let's talk to the school. Let's talk to their parents. Let's befriend those kids. But also, there's a new episode of like Dexter, and it's another trope of it's always the picked on kid who's suicidal, and then he's going to be the school shooter. now we know, having looked back, a lot of those kids were the bullies.
Yeah.
They were definitely popular. They were not this downtrodden child who was just constantly bullied. The kids that are doing the shooting are also the bullies. There is no one stereotype, but they are all depressed. They do all need help. And there are kids that could have went down that road and didn't. Those are the voices we need to hear.
Yep.
The honest kids who went down that road, that dark path. But who's going to come out and say that, right? It takes a lot of guts. And again, there's going to be so many facets to this to actually fix it. I hope we get to see that in our lifetime, Tom.
Yeah, I agree. And you nailed that, Seth, with the a lot of people thinking that this is just the picked on kid. That's typically the argument that I hear too when people get mad during certain debriefs and stuff. Is, Tom, you're not taking into account that these kids were picked on and they were called X, Y, and Z. Well, if you look at the hate journal that was written by the Nashville shooter, she deflects pretty much everything that she is into those kids, from calling them white and crackers and privileged and rich. She went to that same school. She's calling them homosexual slang words, and he transitioning, however you want to look at it. I always go by the autopsy report when we're doing it at Armored One based on our shooter, but she is stating the same things that she is to them in hate. And Dr. Peter Langman, I think, does the best job. He wrote the book Why Kids Kill and School Shootings, but Why Kids Kill is an excellent book that lays that out, that everyone in the world is picked on. Everyone had an older brother, older sister, older cousin, older kid in the neighborhood. Someone at some point was bigger than you, stronger than you, possibly took your lunch money or called you ugly or whatever. Everyone, even Hulk Hogan, was beat up at some point, right? He might beat me up for saying that next time I see him, but hopefully not. But everyone at some point was picked on and teased by someone. There would be so much violence in the world, so many active shooters to revenge that. But explain to me how in Uvalde, an 18-year-old boy who was picked on, but he was also a bully and starting fights and doing stuff, why he went into a fourth grade classroom to kill kids compared to going to the high school graduation, where the kids that were in school with him from when he was a kid and the people coming out and saying poor kid was picked on and that's why he shot. Why did he kill fourth graders and why didn't he kill the bullies that were beating him up? Because it's pure evil. We can't explain how this goes and how bad it is, but some great points that you made there.
Yeah. Well, again, Tom, I know that you're very busy, and I really appreciate you taking the time. Again, I'm going to do a deep dive into your book, so that's going to be another episode that I'm going to do. I'm going to start trying to do more of those, of just talking head, where I'm sharing the lessons that are already in these books,
yep.
Right? Because that doesn't take a lot of external time, so I can pump those things out, and I want to get more content out because right now I feel like I'm still not able to, it seems like in podcasting you've got to be out there putting out so much content to really break through that noise, and I've got to get through that noise to share your message, to share your product, to get people to start paying attention to this more seriously. And again, as a new dad, and I'm about to start the IVF journey again for a little daughter, and we get to pick because we did the genetic testing.
Nice.
So it will be a little girl, and my wife wanted a girl first, and I said, in this world, she needs an older brother to protect her.
Yeah.
That's what she's going to have. But all that to say, man, I really appreciate the work that you do as a human, man. And for real, that's what I love most about this podcast. Even though there's not a million people watching me right now, I love getting to talk to real heartfelt humans who are trying to make a difference in the world, and they don't care about the money. And when you say that to people, a lot of people roll their eyes because they're not used to coming in contact with people that are made from that kind of fabric.
Yeah.
And we just are. We're working toward things that aren't going to make us rich, but we hope that it's going to save some life, and that will be worth all the money that or fame or anything else that goes with, all the rest. So loved having you on. Also, I definitely need to come check out your factory. I want to do a deep dive into your actual film, look at it myself, do all those things. I know we planned on doing that already. That's going to be a part 2 of this podcast.
Yeah, we're definitely going to make that happen.
I can't wait to share all of it.
Awesome. I can't wait. I appreciate you having me on. I want to encourage you to keep going because I did a season of podcasting and it is a lot of work, and be ready for a lot of hate too. These people that know everything and will tell you what to do. They're not making a difference. You are, but they'll talk trash. They will talk crap. But I always challenge them back. What are you doing to better society and to save people? You want to dog us because we're out here doing something. No one has a hard time when a emergency room doctor is saving your kid's life after a car wreck. But if we have a company that's saving kids from an active shooter, we're all of a sudden snake oil and terrible people. That's true for some of them, but not true for all of them. And if you look at our roadmap of what we've done and the differences we've made, the amount that we've donated, nearly $1 million down to Uvalde schools for what they're doing and recovering from, we care about America. We care about America's kids. And you hit it right on the head, that nail, with your military background, law enforcement, my law enforcement. Saving someone's life is worth more than any paycheck anyone can give you. You could have Elon Musk give you all of his money. It does not compare to getting some kid home to his mom, doing CPR and saving someone's life. You never can replicate that feeling with money. So for the people who think it's about the money, they have no idea what it's like to really save someone's life and protect someone. So I appreciate you having me on here, man.
Absolutely, brother.